better outcomes in our cataract surgeries. Just as he's setting up, I would like to have a question to the audience. What would be your threshold of a small pupil, and at what point, at what size of the pupil would you think that you would be definitely needing a pupillary expansion devices? Anyone answer from the audience? Sorry? 3 mm, yeah. So you would hear multiple answers like say 3 mm or 4 mm or 5 mm. Probably it all depends on, can we have the slides on please? It all depends on the experience and the skill of the surgeon, how the iris tissue behaves on table, and what was the pre-existing clinical condition. Can you put on the slides please? Yeah, thank you so much. No financial interest. So we were talking about how small is really small, and definitely depending on the surgeon's skill and expertise, we would all probably be more comfortable as we become more experienced with smaller the size of the pupil. Definitely, as we see the patients in the OPD, we would screen them for which of the patients would we really encounter a small pupil on table. So we have to remember a patient who has pseudo-exfoliation, a chronic diabetic, a rigid pupil due to old age, or an IFIS. So definitely you have to ask for medical history of especially alpha blockers or tamsulosin. A patient who has come to you with recurrent uveitis, you can see posterior synechiae, definitely you have to be more careful on table. Any old trauma or old surgery. Patients of chronic glaucoma who are on long-term myotics, definitely they would not be dilating so well. So the basic technical challenges in a patient who has a small pupil is because of poor visibility. So you can tend to probably damage the iris, and if you have a very small CCC because of a small pupil, then the further maneuvers become more and more difficult. You could have retained cortical material, IOL placement could be difficult, you may end up having a PC rupture because of poor visibility, and all this can end up having a poor visual outcome and an unhappy patient. So what we need to do is fine-tune your surgery in various ways. So in the preoperative screening, as we said already, medical and ocular history, look how much the pupil is dilating. For example, if you have planned a flax for a patient and you see that the pupil is just 3 or 3.5, you will definitely not go in and advise the patient for a flax. Regarding techniques, you would use multiple other procedures like pupil stretching, which may not be so recommended today. Phaco settings, you have to probably reduce your vacuum and keep a low flow rate, and various materials like special OVDs, high viscosity OVDs like Helon and Helon GV, no financial interest, and pupillary expanding devices. So we have a stepwise approach. So you have a patient who is non-dilating, you have tried everything, even preoperative NSAIDs, and then you see that there are adhesions, synechiae on table, and then you go ahead with this. So this is what we used to do earlier. Yes, first thing is you have to break all the synechiae with a good repositor. Not all cases you would really rush into a pupillary expansion device. So this is where I thought that probably we can go ahead with just a pupillary stretching, one end to the other, 90 degrees apart, limbus to limbus, and then you have a well dilated adequate size pupil where you can go ahead with the rest of the maneuvers. This was a patient who was already a trap done, you can see a PBI, and then rest of the maneuvers become very easy. However, you have to remember that these pupils can come down even during the course of the surgery. So you have to just be careful and be in the central zone, say in the central 3 to 4 millimeter zone. This was the post-op day 1. You can see a nice round pupil, 6.6. Now this was another patient where you had adherent glaucoma and a hypermature cataract. So you have here a case where you cannot really expand the pupil in the inferior direction of the adherent glaucoma, and it's a hypermature cataract. You have to be extremely careful so that there's no anterior capsular tear, because then the visibility in the periphery is so poor that you don't know whether it can extend into the posterior capsule. So all the maneuvers, and it's a relatively hard, dense cataract, all the chopping has to be done in the central zone, away from the endothelium. So a lot of things you have to take care. So entire focus is on the iris margin also, so that you don't catch onto the iris margin, otherwise that will bring down the pupil even more and make life more difficult. The next case is basically you can use many intracameral agents like yes, Epitrade, Phenocaine that you have today, and OVDs. Now the problem with OVDs are as you are doing the surgery, they can get easily washed out, and you have to remember to replenish them at every point so that you don't lose out on the chamber as well as the pupil doesn't come down. So now coming on to the pupillary expansion devices, you have a lot of them available, but what we are routinely using are the iris hooks, the Melugan ring, and the B-hex ring. Now these are the two eyes of the same patient. Now to the left, they are both of pseudo-exfoliation. To the left, we have a patient where I thought the pupil was adequately dilated, so we didn't use any pupillary expanding device. To the right, we thought that the pupil is not so well dilated, so we went in for iris hooks. Now usually you can use 4 iris hooks, you also have the 5th one available, and they can be easily inserted through the side ports. Only disadvantage is you need to make multiple side ports, and then you put them laterally, and then you have a stopper so that they remain in place. The only problem is you should not really pull on the iris too much so that they don't cause too much of sphincter tears. If you see to the left, if the pupil were to come down, then it would make life more difficult for the surgeon. So if at all you have a doubt whether your pupil is borderline, I would say always go in for a pupillary expanding device so that the rest of the maneuvers become really easy. There's no ego issue at all to use any pupillary expanding device. What you want at the end of the day is a good visual outcome without any event like a PCR. Now the same 2 eyes you can see post-operatively in the eye with the where the iris hooks were used. Because of a slightly greater pull, you could have problems like an irregularly sized pupil, which was better avoided. Sometimes you can have the iris retractors, which are very sharp. So you need to be really careful as you're inserting it. And as you can see here, the tip onto the left, as you can see, has actually torn the anterior capsule. So these are things that you need to be very careful. And sometimes if you have already made a rhexis and you are trying to expand the pupil using retractors, remember that that can tear the anterior capsular margin. Now coming on to the Melugan ring, it's a beautiful ring, a beautiful device. It's a preloaded one. It has a hook like this. So you just insert it and then hold on to it. These are the scrolls that encircle the pupil, and they're very, very delicate on the pupillary margin. Now this is a case which was a one-eyed patient, and already other eye lost due to glaucoma, and even this eye had advanced glaucoma. You can see how the we have stained the anterior capsule, and the bleb is also stained with trypan blue. Now we have taken the Melugan ring here because the anterior chamber also was very shallow. The Melugan ring gives it a uniplanar, in the same plane. Unlike iris hooks, it doesn't really reduce the anterior chamber depth in the periphery. So that's an advantage. Very gently, each of the scrolls are then encircled along the pupillary margin. It's not a very difficult procedure, but you have to be very, very careful because especially in cases like this, you have a very shallow anterior chamber, and rest of the maneuvers are as usual. Once the lens is put, again you disinsert each of the scrolls, and then with the same hook you can just remove the Melugan ring very, very easily, and then the rest of the procedure is done. We have the B-hex pupillary expander, which is devised by our very own Dr. Suven Bhattacharya. It has 6 notches which engage the pupil and 6 flanges. Now 3 of the flanges have without holes which can go above the iris, and the other 3 are with the holes which go behind the iris, but you can also do it the other way around as long as the alternate ones are above and below the iris respectively. Now this was a case of a floppy iris patient who wanted a multifocal. So you can see the pupil is coming down. So definitely in such a case you need some kind of pupillary expanding device, and I went in for the B-hex. So we are using the 23 gauge forceps here. For the 2 side ports, for the side flanges, I'm going through the side ports, and very gently each of the flanges are then inserted underneath the iris margin. There could be some amount of iris pigment dispersion, but it really doesn't really harm in any way. You can see we are going ahead with the capsular rhexis, a gentle hydrodissection, and the rest of the phacoemulsification procedures. After the after the irrigation and aspiration, you can see a very nice central round rhexis inside the hexagonal pupil, which gives very good adequate dilatation, almost of around 6.5 millimeters. And then at the end, you can just remove the thin profiled B-hex ring with just through the main incision. In fact, it's so thin that you can also remove it through the or insert it through the side port. Now this was the multifocal IOL patient. You can see next day post-op, nice small round pupil, 6.6 and 6. Now coming to IFIS, it's not really the same as any small pupil. It could basically, many people have postulated using pre-surgical topical atropine, intracameral Epitrade, but careful wound construction is important. You need a good enough length of the wound. If it's too short, then it could cause repeated iris prolapse. Now regarding the irrigation, when you're holding the irrigation across, which is facing the, along the pupillary margin, you can cause more of the floppiness. So that has to be kept in mind. You can use one iris retractor underneath the incision. What does not work is stopping Flomax, that does not reverse. Pupil stretching, sphincterotomies and overfilling OVDs also does not work. This was an interesting case where we did first a rhexis. You can see it's an adequately sized pupil. However, once the rhexis was completed and I started, I thought I would go ahead with the hydrodissection. As you will see here, suddenly the pupil starts coming down for no reason. In fact, I thought probably the system must have given me some pilocarpine in it. But now we already have the rhexis done and we have a very small pupil at hand. Definitely we need to use a pupillary expander, so we are going ahead with the BHEX. Now this is the same procedure as the earlier, so I am skipping this. This was another case where we have a very small pupil, a fibrosed pupil, and it's a case where, I'll just finish it also. So this was just showing how we are just doing a pupillary stretching using a BHEX expander, and the case ends well. This was the post-operative case. So friends, these are various expansion devices that we are using, and whatever we use, even in flax, you may or may not do flax. In a small pupil, you may need to use OVDs and change the settings. Prostaglandin release can cause meiosis, or people have used Melugin rings and then done flax. So for want of time, I would just conclude that in increasing patient expectation today and use of premium IOLs, optimal use of these devices can give good visual outcomes. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anaga, for summing it up very well. Now we go to Chitra, who's going to talk on special situations for use of flax. Please go ahead.
So I start.